You know that feeling when you open an app on your phone and it just works? Like the currency is right, the language feels totally natural, everything's exactly where you think it should be. It feels like it was made just for you, right here in your country. Well, behind that super smooth experience is this massive, incredibly detailed process. So today, we're going to dive into this hidden world of software localization, using a really fascinating case study from Indonesia.
Okay, first things first, we've got to get one thing straight. What we're talking about here is not just translation. Translation is, swapping one word for another. Localization, that is something much, much deeper. We're talking about adapting the entire product to fit a new culture, a new market, and a whole new set of rules. It doesn't just change the words, it can change the entire logic of the software itself.
I like to think of it like this. Translation is like repainting a house, but localization, that's a full-on architectural renovation. You're moving walls, you're rewiring the electricity, redoing the plumbing to meet local building codes. You're not just changing the way it looks, you are fundamentally changing how it works to fit its new environment.
To really get our heads around this, we're going to go on a little journey, kind of zooming in from the 30,000-foot view right down to the microscopic details. We'll start with the big picture problem, then we'll dive into the specific financial rules of Indonesia, see how a local version is actually built, obsess over single words, and then, finally, we'll zoom back out to see why all of this really matters.
All right, section 1, the big picture. So why is this so hard in the first place? Well, the main challenge is that for a lot of software, especially anything that has to do with money, a single one-size-fits-all version just doesn't work. It's impossible. You can't build one thing and just expect it to function correctly everywhere in the world.
And this is the absolute key. In the world of finance and accounting, we're not talking about cultural suggestions. These are hard legal rules. A small mistake in a regular translation might be a little embarrassing, but a small mistake in financial localization, that can be illegal. We're talking fines, audits, and just total chaos for a business. The stakes are incredibly high.
So let's zoom in on our case study. Section 2, Indonesia's financial rules. We're going to look at the very specific, non-negotiable financial DNA that any accounting software has to adopt to even have a chance of working there.
Now, check this out. We've got two countries, Indonesia and Timor-Leste, right next to each other. People in Timor-Leste even use Indonesian as a working language. But look at the difference. Indonesia runs on its own complex set of accounting standards called SAC, with all these different variants. Meanwhile, Timor-Leste just uses the global IFRS standard. You absolutely cannot use the same software for both countries. It's impossible.
And the differences get even more fundamental when you look at taxes. Indonesia uses a value-added tax system, or PPN. Timor-Leste uses a direct sales tax. These aren't just different numbers. The entire logic of how tax is calculated, credited, and reported is completely different. Oh, and of course, they use totally different currencies. You have to rebuild the software's core engine, not just translate the word for tax.
And this one number right here really drives home the need for absolute total precision. The software has to have the correct 12% VAT rate for Indonesia built right in. If you get this one single number wrong, the software becomes useless and non-compliant for every single person using it in the country. It's really that simple.
Okay, so let's move on to Section 3 and see how this actually gets built. We know the rules now, but how does a developer take those rules and create the Indonesian version? How do you get from a generic, blank template to a fully functioning, compliant local tool?
Well, it's a very methodical, step-by-step process. A developer starts with a completely blank, customizable template. They give it a new name, they switch the language over to Indonesian, and then the really crucial work begins. They have to go in and manually translate these foundational concepts, so invoice becomes factor. Then they go even deeper, translating things like debtor's control. And finally, they import the entire Indonesian chart of accounts, which is basically the financial blueprint for the country.
This brings us to Section 4, and this is where we put things under a microscope. The big structures are in place, but this is where the real magic happens. This is the relentless, obsessive polishing of every single tiny detail to make the software not just usable, but actually perfect for the local user.
Take a look at this change. It seems so small, right? From batch to journal. But in accounting, this is a huge deal. The word batch could easily be confused with a batch of inventory, like a shipment of products. Journal, on the other hand, is the precise, unambiguous term for a group of financial transactions. This one tiny word change prevents a ton of potentially costly user errors down the line. And you can see just how seriously the developers take this stuff. This is a direct instruction to their translators.
They aren't just saying, hey, translate this word. They're explaining the deep context behind it to make sure it's absolutely clear for the end user. They're even giving examples in other languages, like German. This is what real localization looks like.
Here's another little detail I just love. In the user messages, they changed the path indicator from a hyphen and a greater than sign to a proper arrow, and they put it in quotes. Why bother? Because it's cleaner, it's more modern, and it visually screams this is a navigation path much more clearly to the user. It's a tiny, tiny detail that just makes everything a little easier to use.
Okay, this next one is a huge game changer from a development point of view. Imagine the app is called TurboCASH 5-3. Originally, that name was manually typed into 45 different places in the code. Now, what happens when the next version comes out? Some poor developer has to manually find and edit all 45 of those labels in every single language. It's a recipe for disaster. So the solution? They replaced it with this single dynamic placeholder. Now the software just automatically inserts the correct name everywhere. Brilliant. So this one little technical change has these massive strategic benefits. It means one set of language files can work for a bunch of different products, it makes updates automatic, it ensures perfect consistency, and it dramatically reduces the chance of human error. It's all about working smarter, not harder. And I just love this last detail. It's another one of those direct instructions that shows you how deeply the developers are thinking about the user's experience. By deciding to always put square brackets around button names inside a sentence, they make it instantly clear to the user, hey, this is the thing you need to click. It's so simple, but so incredibly effective. Okay, section 5. Let's zoom all the way back out. We've seen the big overarching rules and the tiny obsessive details. But what is the real-world impact of all this meticulous and often completely invisible work?
This is the payoff right here. When all those details are right, the user doesn't even notice them. The software just feels right. It feels intuitive, and that builds trust. Businesses can be confident they're compliant with local laws. This reduces expensive mistakes, it cuts down on support calls, and it creates an experience that feels so native that it builds incredible loyalty. It really proves that to be a global company, you have to sweat the local detail.
Ultimately, it really all comes down to this. The whole goal of all this incredible effort is to become invisible. Perfect localization doesn't draw attention to itself. It just works seamlessly. You only ever notice it when someone gets it wrong. When the currency is off, or a term is confusing, or the tax is just plain incorrect. So the next time you're using an app that just feels perfectly tailored to your life, take a second and look a little closer. Think about the date formats, the measurements, the slang, the currency, what invisible work, what obsessive attention to detail is happening behind the screen to make it feel like it was made just for you.